I don't know what kind of recording direction this microphone is. Like, I don't know if it's like a park and bark microphone or if it works. Do you know this term, Sadie? Park and bark?
I have not heard that term.
Park and bark, it's a singing term. It's where you just get right at the front of the stage or whatever, and you just plant and you get your microphone and you put it right up here like you're supposed to, not like this. That's not how you use a microphone. You use the microphone like this. And then you park and bark. Sometimes you do that in an opera too, but without the microphone. So for Bluebeard's Castle, for example, because there's only 2 people on stage and it's a gigantic orchestra, if you do it the way it's written, to be able to be heard over the orchestra, the leads just park and bark the whole time. They don't really move around the stage. Hi, Arthur.
Arthur demands to be the center of attention.
As he should.
I'm Justin. I'm a Skullcom librarian. My pronouns are he and they.
I'm Sadie. I work IT at a public library, and my pronouns are they, them.
And I'm Jay. I'm a music library director, and my pronouns are he, him.
I got a new strap-on harness today. I can't wait to have your cock in my mouth.
It's so funny. I honestly want to take up his suggestion of going into, what's it called? Book looks, and finding the rating where it shows how many times a book says fuck, shit, cock, ass, stuff like that, and guessing which book it is based on the numbers. That seems like a really fun game.
That would make that a game for the show.
I know. I was like, we should do that.
I'm going to give you the blowjob of your life.
I'm so glad you clipped that.
Same.
So if you haven't seen it, John Oliver did an episode that had the main segment on libraries.
Yeah, my psychiatrist asked me about it last night if I'd seen it.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
I didn't have a whole lot of takeaways from it because I feel like we've covered everything he's talked about.
Mm-hmm. I think the main thing to say is that it's better than, like, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
You know, it's like all shit we've talked about and all shit we know, but like he's got like a lib take in there, but otherwise it's all like exactly the kinds of shit that we've been saying, even including diagnosing that this isn't about books. This is about trying to remove queer people from public life. Like that's how he concludes it. And I'm like, yeah, that's correct. This isn't about books at all. So, yeah.
Yeah, I noticed that, like, at the beginning, too, he talks about how it went from school libraries to public libraries, which I feel like is something that, like, the very first time we started to talk about this, we were like, this is going to happen. And then it immediately happened. So, like, children in school libraries, it's like, then it'll be about public libraries. And now it is. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do like that he starts it by talking about the distinction between regular weeding, where we do throw away books, right? That happens very routinely, as we all know, and book challenges, censorship, and even just the process of relocating books from one section to the other, which I think people feel like is a good solution. That, like, that's not censorship, that's fine, just move it from one section to the other. But like, it's still part of the same thing, and I'm glad that he included relocating as a form of censorship. I was like, yes, good take, John Oliver, good take. I also like that he talked about obscenity laws and how they're being applied very broadly, including children's books about like the book Everybody Poops, or books about like farting and stuff. Like, what is obscene in our definition of obscene, about learning about a bodily function that, for all intents and purposes, right now isn't sexual. Like, this isn't a sex ed type of book. This is a, like, everybody poops, everybody farts, you don't have to be ashamed about it kind of book. And like, those were labeled as obscene alongside like genderqueer and stuff, which I found it fun that there was actually a clip from the author of Genderqueer being like, my book isn't a kid's book.
And contrasting that to the parent who's like, it
It
appeals
looks
to
like
children.
cartoons.
It looks like cartoons. I'm like, you have your preconceptions of what a graphic novel is does not erase the actual history of graphic novels that have long been for adults. Also,
Yeah.
I don't see you in there trying to fucking take down the Walking Dead, which,
Right.
by the way, is way more graphic than genderqueer when it comes to sexuality.
Oh yeah.
So like,
Or like all of the like
it's
fucking
cartoony. I'm like, you don't know what art is, do you?
like how many women get raped in like Batman comics?
Right?
You know, like on page.
Right? Yeah. I
You
mean, that's
know?
why I brought up The Walking Dead. It's because that happens multiple times in The Walking Dead. And it's like,
Yeah.
that's not the one that you're like, my kid thinks this is a cartoon. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like I'm glad that the author of Genderqueer was like, my book is not for children. It could be for teens, but it's not for children. It shouldn't be, quote, in the children's section of a library. If we're going to have these sections, that's not actually where it should be. It could be in like the teen section or the adult section if we're going to do that kind of thing. But it's not for teenagers. Like I loved their quote, not every book in a library is for children.
Yep.
Like not every book in a library is for everybody. Everybody could read every book in the library, but I guess like the intended audience, like we've talked about, some kids know when they pick something up if maybe it's not for them. They should still have access to it. But most of the time they'll be like embarrassed or just not know what's going on, right? So I was very happy to see that. Like to get the little clip of the author, because like I feel like so much of this, I'm going to turn into Lee Edelman now, like so much of this is like equating public libraries just with children and forgetting that other types of people and children are also people who have autonomy and should be able to read whatever they want, right? But that like other types of people use libraries, and not every single fucking thing in public life needs to cater to children.
Right. Also, what was it? Porn is a sugary treat. Fucking loved that
I mean,
line.
it is. No.
No, the thing that like the community that harassed their library director out of her job over 400 books that weren't even in the
weren't
fucking
even
library system.
in the library.
Right.
Oh.
And like I like that he talks about how this is a concerted effort
Yeah.
by organized groups, people who are picking up lists from Facebook and other websites and shit. Because like, yeah, and I think that a lot of public libraries are changing their materials challenges process.
Yes.
To be, at least at my library, you have to have read the book in its entirety for the challenge to be considered. And you can only submit one book per materials challenge. So if you wanted all 400 of those books to be submitted, you would have to do the form 400 fucking times. And it would just be considered one. So like every person who wanted all 400 of those books would have to do it 400 times, right?
Yeah.
So like I feel like that's kind of the first line of defense that a lot of libraries are doing against this concerted effort, which I think is a good plan. Like, yeah, you should have to actually read the entirety of the book, and no, you shouldn't be able to throw down a whole list of books and be like, I want all of these reconsidered. Like, that's not the point of the materials challenge process in the slightest.
Right. Like sometimes like we can't read every book that we buy for a library. And you know what? Sometimes, I mean, obviously I don't think that children should be banned from reading anything, but like maybe sometimes we get a book and we put it there and maybe it would be more appropriate elsewhere in the library, right? Maybe a book is like fashy bullshit or a poor quality. Like there's a lot of reasons you might want to challenge a book in a library that aren't right-wing Christian fundamentalist or even necessarily like left-wing political, like either. Like there's lots of reasons. It just because of the fact that we don't read everything that we buy.
Yeah, and having talked to like public librarians, a lot of the times when these things have come up in the past, it is because it was a simple like mistake made during cataloging, like a book that should have been in the YA section accidentally ends up in the children's section because the first book of the series was considered children, but then, you know, or other things by that author were considered. Like I remember hearing that story, like this author wrote a children's series, like a mid-grade series, and then wrote older teen series. And the librarian who's cataloging it didn't pay enough attention and just threw that new book series into the children's section. It was not where it was. It shouldn't have been there to begin with. So like,
and not that children can't read that, but it was written for teenagers.
Exactly. Like everything about it was supposed to be for teenagers. So even so it's just such a weird perversion of the process.
Yeah. And I think John Oliver does a good thing in this episode by like making this an actionable episode. Because he talks about like the quote was, "Who's on the library board matters." And so he's like encouraging people to go to the library board meetings and everything. My favorite quote from the whole thing was, "Protecting libraries is a fight, but it's also winnable." And I was like, yes, dude, that is correct. This was surprisingly like better takes than I was expecting.
Yeah, same. But yeah, I like how he quoted the one librarian who was like, "Did y'all think there wouldn't be a consequence to your vote? That's the whole fucking point of the voting. You took away our entire funding and now you're saying you don't want the library to close. Like, what the fuck did you think was going to happen?"
Yeah.
People approaching their votes and their like civic duties as symbolic as opposed to being actual actions that you do to participate in the society that you are part of, sorry, that's been my high horse lately. So
yeah, like the shows where like electoral action and like actually matters materially is this local kind of stuff, right? Where it's small community making decisions like this. That's where it's actually like kind of important to get involved electorally sometimes. And he showed exactly why. Like you see the material consequence like of this kind of work way more than you do at like the state or federal level. Yeah.
I did have one critique of it, which is I wish he would have gone into how the groups behind it are like a sub faction of the Republican Party. Like a lot of it is around the DeSantis campaign, probably because they had to spend their money because they couldn't, because he set up his PAC wrong. So I think that might be one reason they funnel money that way. But it's a lot of it is really from like Moms for Liberty is like entirely a Florida Republican run movement.
Yeah, we did the whole episode on it.
Yeah. So I wish you would have gone into that a little bit more, maybe dug up some other stuff and named some names, because it is pretty astroturfed. I mean, there's a lot of people who are just taking the ball and running with it, but Moms for Liberty is definitely an astroturf organization.
Yeah, because it's like I know one of the other things about book challenges is that like often like sometimes they're from people who aren't even in that library's district, and so some libraries now in the policies are going, by the way, like you have to be a card carrying member of this library in order to submit a challenge. So yeah, it's a good segment. I recommend people watch it. Again, it's everything that we've been saying on here for months now, but for the type of audience who will be watching this is probably more in-depth and more actionable and more material as to what the actual issue is and what its purpose is than I feel like a lot of news reporting that focuses solely on like, oh, it's book bans and that's bad, and the topic of the books and everything, like where it's solely focused on books and not what the end goal is of banning books. So I'm glad that he was like, this isn't about books, this is about pushing queer people out of public. And I was like, wow, John Oliver, go off. Like,
nice,
he's not always he's like pretty good. Like the whole beginning of this episode is just him like just doing a bunch of like pro-Palestine like student encampment stuff. So he's not fucking around. Good for him.
All right. For the next thing in the news roundup, I wanted to talk about I think this was the one that I saved, but there are some, I guess, like roundups coming out of all the legislative stuff that's happening, particularly like the book bans, the librarian qualified immunity stuff. I just realized my voice is really loud.
It sounds fine to me.
Looks like it's peaking on my end. Oops.
It always looks like it's peaking on your end.
Yeah, maybe. I also had it way up because of a meeting where no one could hear me. So it's not normally this loud. Okay. Yeah, it's definitely peaking. Okay. The WAPO piece is called Red States Threaten Librarians with Prison as Blue States Work to Protect Them. That's not entirely accurate. There are some blue states that are also doing this, like Virginia, and technically Georgia's a blue state.
Is Virginia technically a blue state right now?
It's based on how the presidential votes go.
Okay. Virginia?
Virginia went Biden.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Virginia's very purple right now. Like it's very in the middle. Much more than like Florida. Florida will go either way than presidential, but Florida tends to almost always have a Republican legislature.
Yeah. Whereas New Hampshire always votes blue federally, but at the state level, it's just all Republicans.
Yeah.
It's so weird. Yeah. That was a weird place to live.
So it's nice to see like infographics and stuff, like laws restricting libraries, how many there are. Like Utah's got like 4. Illinois. What I was surprised in is there are a lot fewer protecting libraries than I thought, because I thought a lot of these had passed. Like I thought New Hampshire had one. I thought Vermont had one, but apparently those have all kind of died. So it's really interesting
Just
to see.
Illinois, right?
Illinois, California, Washington. Washington has 2 laws.
I had heard about the Illinois one, but I hadn't heard about California and Washington.
Yeah, I mean, they're all kind of different. Like the one in Washington, like puts aside money for libraries as well. So,
whereas the Illinois one is just about
mentioned.
bans. Washington mentioned. Whereas Illinois is just about book bans, right?
I think it's one of the earlier ones. Yeah, that
it's just
says
like
you can't you can't have political partisan reason for removing.
Okay, but people are just going to go around that and say it's not a political partisan reason.
Yeah, of course. Well, that's the thing is like trying to make something.
They've even got a good
neutral.
governor right now, but you know.
Yeah. So like there's a bill pending in New Jersey protecting library workers, but yeah, a lot of these that I thought had passed didn't. And some of them I thought had passed, like the bad ones were blocked by veto. So it's a good piece because it's kind of just up to date on all of the different laws if you want to look at it. And it's got a separate category for the ones that remove qualified immunity for librarians from obscenity laws to minors, which I was just listening to the 5-4 podcast about a case from the 1890s where qualified immunity kind of starts. And it's like you can't sue your own state in federal court. And then since then, that's where qualified immunity is added up more and more and more. So like all the people you can't sue, and because of like the civil rights movement, they kept expanding it. Like you can't sue cops, you can't sue the judge,
and librarians are city workers or county workers. So
yeah, but generally in the laws you have immunity as an educator.
Oh, okay.
So that way you're able to show like a sex ed book and not get in trouble if someone doesn't like it.
Yeah.
So those laws are kind of being modified, and that's what a lot of the opening librarians up to prosecution is about, which is funny because all the times we talk about how librarians are agents of the state when they work for the government. And it's like, this is your own like enforcement arm of the state, but it's the liberal part of the state that, fascists don't like.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they want cops to be librarians, which brings us to cops raid encampments and weaponize books and zines. So hopefully everyone saw the guy from The Borrowers, who's the NYPD associate dean of propaganda or whatever the fuck his title is. With that blown up version of terrorism, a very short introduction.
Obviously, like a fake book printed cover. I mean, it's a real book. It's just way smaller. So that was obviously some sort of like cover he printed out and slapped on another book as evidence of contraband, which is very funny because this John Oliver also brings this up in the episode, by the way, and says that this isn't a handbook on how to do a terrorism. This isn't here's how we do 9/11 to Electric Boogaloo. There's literally a chapter in there on like how do we stop terrorism or something. Like it's a book about, it's like a sociological, political book or whatever.
Like a very short political science text.
Yeah,
it's the Cambridge very short.
It's Oxford,
series.
Right?
Oxford or Cambridge, yeah.
I think it's Oxford. Sorry, adjusting in my chair. And they went on like national fucking daytime TV when they showed their little like propaganda little movie of when they raided Colombia with that weird stair hopper. With the ladder on it or whatever. Recent episode of Positive America talks about this, so y'all go listen to that. But so they show that, and then they're like, here's this contraband and here's the fucking bike law blocks. And then they show like this fucking book. And this made me like, people are dunking on this, and rightly so, because this is so obviously like manufactured. This is so obviously fake, right? And also them just being like idiots who don't know what like a textbook is.
Right. Well, this also shows how they've been training with the IDF, because this is exactly what the IDF keeps doing in Gaza, which is like, we found a book about Hitler. And it's like, yeah, and you also keep finding rare antiquities that you keep stealing from Gaza too.
Yeah. But this made me think, so with book challenges, for the most part, we've been seeing them in public libraries and in school libraries, places where children are. But we haven't really seen them as much in academic libraries. Like, I can't think of an example right now. I'm sure there are some, but I can't think of them off the top of my head, right? But if cops are using this that they quote unquote found at the Columbia, was that the Columbia or the CUNY student encampment, like, look what these college students are reading from the outside agitators or whatever, which, side note, outside agitators are a good thing, actually. That's what solidarity means, you fucking idiots. Like, goddamn. But like, are we going to start seeing book challenges in academic libraries now, and not over things like genderqueer and stuff, but over like political books like this, like, is the, you know, the 100 years war on Palestine? Because if you had all these professors like having their courses canceled and stuff for talking about Palestine, like, when are those books going to be removed from the library? So this had me worried about that. But then also, like, it made me think of like the format of our books, and like, if they're gonna like fabricate bullshit like this, like, is it better for us to use ebooks then? Like, is it better for us to buy ebooks for the library, like, so that like students can have them more discreetly, and it's harder to fabricate that? Like, I guess, like, how do we prevent this kind of propaganda, basically? I mean, I'm sure we can't prevent it, but what are measures that we can take to like make it harder for them to do this, so that when they do it, it's obvious to not just us? So that's what that made me think of. And then I see someone made a note about the Patriot Act, and like, I know, was it Simon tweeted yesterday or today about how like Ex Libris and like all of these like cloud services that libraries use, like, we don't own them, and so our patron data isn't actually controlled by us.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely had coworkers who've had police show up and ask about like patron records, and just had to go, well, you need a warrant. And that's really all you got to say, because I think in a lot of these situations, it's just going to be like a local sheriff. It's not going to be the Department of Homeland Security coming, and they're not going to think to have a warrant. They're not going to have one of those FISA warrants or whatever they're fucking called. They're just going to show up and hope that you're acquiescent. And all you got to say is, give me a warrant.
And if you are the person who configures your ILS, or you can talk to that person or whatever, there are probably settings about what kind of data you retain and for how long. My library right now is going through the process of migrating to WMS. And part of that was like, you can choose just to not save data, including like who was the last person to check something out, or like search history, or like all sorts of things. You can choose just to not preserve that at all. Or if you do want to preserve it, because like, in my library, sometimes like things might not get checked in or out correctly, or things go missing. So sometimes it can be helpful to see who the last person was who had it. But I can choose to only keep that for like a year or something. And those are settings that can change. So like, look to see what your settings are. I know Library Freedom Project does or did have like a scorecard for like vendor privacy, but like, go through and see like what kind of patron data you are keeping and for how long, and if you can change it. Yes, Sadie, is your hand up.
I was going to say, and don't assume that just because you can't see it as an end user of that ILS, that it doesn't exist.
Yep.
I know in Polaris, there is the sort of basic, I can, as a staff member, go in and look at the record for a book. It'll only show you the last known patron, and it only keeps certain records for like a year or something like that. But as an IT staff member who has access to the actual entire backend database, if we're not running the reports that wipe out that data, we can literally go in and see anytime a book has even slightly changed status and who did it at what branch, et cetera, et cetera. So bring that up with your IT too, if they're the ones who are involved in your ILS, but also get that shit in policy.
Yes.
Get that shit in writing. That is part of your data retention policies. Yes. How long do you keep this patron data? Like, what actions need to be taken on a regular basis? Like, can you automate it? Is it an automatic? Like, can you automate it? Is it something that somebody has to manually go in and delete? That's going to vary between ILSs greatly. But I guarantee you, especially any ILS that is used in public libraries, has some sort of capability. So don't let anybody be like, "Oh, well, we can't do that." Feed you that bullshit. But it's for your data retention policy. It's not even necessarily like you don't even have to be like, well, police can get this data. You can just be like, there's probably state laws that govern how long we can keep this shit. Why aren't we following that? We need to have it in writing. Put it in writing.
Yeah, I know Koha has the ability, even if you don't control the back-end database, where you can anonymize your circulation records. So if, because we're currently on Koha and we're moving to WMS, and I think you can do, and what I would do is at the end of every year is I would delete the people who had graduated, and then I would anonymize all of the circulation data except for things currently checked out. So there are a lot of things where if I go and look at them, it will say this was checked in, this was checked out, and when that happened, but the record of who did it is no longer there. It just says a patron from the library. And that's what it says. So if you have Koha, that's the thing that you can do. I don't think you can do that in WMS, which is sad. And so FYI. But yeah, that's a nice feature Koha has. Point to Koha, which I generally don't like otherwise. Also, fuck Ex Libris. Stop getting that for your libraries. Move away from it. There's better systems that are cheaper.
Yeah. Do you want to bring up the Zine distros?
Yes, I do. So in addition to the NYPD finding terrorism 101 books, contraband, and showing them on TV, the Israel like war account, like there was like some sort of Israeli account, like War News or something, that tweeted about like all of the contraband and evil propaganda that was found in the encampments. And some of those things that they found were zines, because as we've all been seeing at these encampments is that students have been setting up libraries, which fucking rules. If you are a student at one of these encampments, past or present, and you help set up one of these libraries, please let us know, because that fucking rules and we're very proud of you. And a lot of the materials in these libraries was obviously like books and stuff, because like Haymarket, AK, PM, all of these places were like, hey, if you're in an encampment, shoot us an email. We will send you free books. Good job. Also, a lot of zines were there, largely anarchist, but not exclusively. It's just the anarchists like putting our zines online for free so that people can print them out, because that's what we do. And a lot of them were skills based, right? How like de-arrest tactics, or like proper holds to do when you're like doing like riot stuff and kettling and all that, like tactics and instruction and stuff like that, how to, what to do if you're being arrested, things like this. And this was very funny. And a couple of zine distros on Twitter, including the Haters Cafe, were like, lol, it's fun to see our stuff like being like yelled about by Israel as proof of outside funding, because they were using this as the whole like outside agitators, outside funding thing. Like, look at these anarchist zines that made their way into the encampments. And it's like, homie, like they printed those off. Or I saw that in BTA distro, which is like a Boston, also just broadly Massachusetts, zine distro. Like I saw them on Instagram and Twitter being like, hey, if you are one of the Boston encampments, shoot us a DM and we will bring you zines for free to have. I saw this a lot. And so the fact that like Israel was trying to say that like the presence of anarchist zines was proof of like outside agitators and outside funding is very funny, because zines are fucking cheap. They're just being printed, right? But also, like, a lot of them are from outside, because people are providing resources and solidarity and sharing free resources and stuff. And this made me want to like also share like that these distros, like, you can go on their websites and most of the time just print stuff off for free, and you can distribute it yourself. Like, you don't have to pay for this. We do this at the Lucy Parsons Center all the time, where people will print these zines out from like MBTA and Sprout Distro and all of these other places, and they will print them out and they will just bring them to the Lucy Parsons Center, and they're sitting there for free that people can take. And so if you're a library worker, or if there's still an encampment at your institution or something, like, print these out, bring them to the encampments, bring them to your public library, bring them to, you know, local bookstores, like, just leave them in coffee shops, like, fucking do some guerrilla distribution. You know, the guy who did Parterre Box started off by like printing it out and cruising men at the Met and leaving him in the men's room. Like, you know, just do whatever. These are free and you can do it. And a lot of these distros right now are focusing on like encampment tactics, like for these students, right? Like DRS techniques and everything. Like, they're not just yelling about politics or anything. They're like instruction manuals. Basically, they're really cool. Or there's like interviews with people from Palestine. Like, I know Black Rose interviewed Fauda, which is an anarchist faction in Palestine right now. And MBTA distro, or No Hater, or Haters Cafe, one of the two, also made that a zine that I've seen distributed everywhere. Like, when I went to the Boston Anarchist Book Fair, all of the tables that had zines, a lot of them all had the same exact zines, because they were just printing off from these distros online. And I grabbed a couple of links to distros. There are many more, and many of these places will have like a page where they list other distros. Like, I know the MBTA distro one has a page where it's like, here's distros that we like. But so see if there's one in your area. A Sprout distro has no geographic region. But yeah, so I thought that would be, I just thought that was interesting that they were like, oh no, the zines. The anarchist zines, the outside funding of the anarchist zines. It is outside agitation, but it's free. So I just thought it was funny.
That reminded me, I was reading about civil rights protests because someone on Twitter was being an idiot. And it just got me so worked up that I had to like start reading about the diversity of tactics in the civil rights movement. And that was one thing that happened a lot with like the sit-ins, was students would start doing it, and then people would just come in out of nowhere and be like, okay, here's what you need to do. Like, here's how you organize. Here's how you keep the movement going. Here's what, you know, and they would be like experienced organizers who've been doing it for, you know, decades.
Yep. And that's a good thing. We should be like, and this is not an opportunity. This is not a saying go vanguard. Don't be PSL and like try to force your way into everything and like take over and think that you're the one that's doing it right. No, if you are not a student at one of these encampments, what you need to do, what is actually helpful, is to be like, this is what I have to offer. Is this helpful? Do you want, like, I was talking with a comrade today, and the way that they phrased it was like, I am the tool, you know, not the like not the like person using the tool. Like, I am here to be used, basically. How can I be useful? You know, here I can do XYZ. Like, this is what I've been doing with any of these groups that I've been involved in. It's like, hey, I'm a librarian. These are my professional skills that I know not everybody has. Are these useful to what we want to be doing here? Like, can these skills that I know I have that not many people maybe have, are these useful in this space? And sometimes they are, and sometimes they're not, you know, such as life. And that's not even my like political skills. It's just like, hey, these are things I know how to do that not everyone does. That's like the way to do that. You don't just go in and say, I know how to do this and you don't. You know, it's collaborative. We learn from each other. This is something in the book Feminist Pedagogy for Library Instruction that is talked about, is that like you can't completely remove hierarchy in instruction, but you are learning from the people that you are giving instruction to as much as they are learning from you, right? And they also have authority in that space, right? It's a conversation back and forth. So.
Yeah, Radical Reference talks about, instead of reference interview, it's reference conversations.
Oh, I love that. I'm going to steal that. I haven't read that.
It's a journal, I think.
Is it? Okay. Yeah. I like that.
I don't know if they ever got off the ground, though. It was like an OJS. Yeah, if it's still around.
Yeah. Yeah. Also related to, like, speaking of the encampments and stuff, that I think is also, we should, as library workers and such, that we should be caring about is some of the reason, the excuse that these universities have been using for sending militarized police in to harass and beat and arrest their students is that they're changing policies at the very last minute without telling people. So, I remember when I was in college, people had tents and hammocks out on the quad when the weather got nice out all the fucking time. That's what the quad is for. It is for students to like get hammocks and do hacky sack and like hang out. That's what it's fucking for. And so now these like universities, they're like adding like no tents on their grass policies at the last fucking minute without telling anybody, which tells me that also they're not going through the proper process for changing policy, probably, as someone who is an asshole about policy. And then they're using that as a reason to arrest students. And the reason people are noticing this is, I'm guessing, because they like have saved or web archived versions of these policies so that they can compare them. Because that's how I saw it on Twitter, that I saw like a before and after. So like, what role do we have in what is going on right now with that? As far as like I mean more as in like preserving and archiving so that there's like proof.
Yeah. I mean, Archive It is usually purchased by universities. So ideally this will be running automatically. But if your university is kind of small, it might not have Archive It, which is the Internet Archive service. You can probably set some automated scraping to happen even through Internet Archive. And you can definitely add things to Internet Archive yourself. There's a add-on you can put in your browser whenever you want to save something. There's perma.cc, which is very good at preserving like PDFs and stuff. But it's a little difficult to get because you have to prove you're like with a university, but you can set it up anyway and be like, hey, we're getting this service and it's free. And that way you'll have a CC account.
Don't university archives, though, also have copies of all of the policies and stuff, or they just do boring meeting minutes and stuff?
It'll be in a records retention policy, but who follows their records retention policy properly?
Yeah.
Also, like, how much of that can you get from public records requests? I'm not sure how that applies. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can also get people's emails where they're discussing it. But the thing about like policy implementation is like faculty governance is a myth.
Yeah.
The shared governance just doesn't really exist anymore because when it was implemented, it used to be that faculty actually rotated into administrative positions and then out of them. Whereas now it's all professional managerial people whose job it is to be a manager. So faculty don't actually get to be in the ones. But even with policy committees and stuff like that, like there's no process at my university where it has to go to the faculty senate or staff senate, I don't think. And if it does, it's just a rubber stamp. There are a lot of committees that are just rubber stamps. I'm on one. I don't, it doesn't matter. There's no reason to like reject anything in the committee I'm on because it's just curriculum committee. But yeah, in terms of like just changing your policy, you can probably do that. And, as long as you're like an executive vice president or higher. So the provost or the president can probably just change it on a whim.
Yeah. So I guess my point is like, how do we be intentional about archiving this kind of stuff, both as people who work in these institutions, but also more from a community standpoint?
I mean, just do web archiving of policies with Internet Archive add-on. I think what happened in the case with the side-by-side, that was literally people were checking it and then pointed out that it wasn't against policy, and then the policy changed. And so then they just happened to notice it because they were already looking to see if it was against policy.
Yeah.
Because in a lot of places, it's not against policy. Like UT Austin, it's probably not against their policy to have an ongoing protest because everywhere outside of a university is a free speech zone at a public university. facility in Texas. It's literally all designated as a free speech zone. So, I don't know if time, place requirements actually are a problem there. I mean, maybe they can tell them to leave at night or something. Maybe, but I doubt there's any written policy about that. I also doubt they had a very specific one. Like in this case, it was like tents need a permit unless it's a small tent, which was the policy at, where was it? Where the policy changed last minute?
I think it was Columbia.
Yeah. Was it? Okay. I don't think it was Columbia, but anyway.
Was it CUNY then?
I think it was UVA. Yes, it was UVA.
It was UVA? Okay.
Yeah. The only reason I remember that is because Socialist Dog Mom was at UVA and she was the one who tweeted about it.
Okay.
And also, a friend of the show, Dave Gamani, is also there and tweeting about it.
Yeah. I know a music librarian at UVA. The UVA also is the one where in their special collections and archives, they redacted, erased, and removed records about that one student getting McCarthyismed after a researcher asked to see. We want to talk about that eventually. I think I mentioned it in the show before, but that's from Queering the Catalog. Queer Philology is what Jeffrey Maston. I'm looking at you, UVA.
Yeah. Also, there was the tweet that was about what do you preserve, which is a dual-sided question in terms of what do we preserve of this political moment, and then also what does the risk of preservation have to people's political safety. So like I've talked about
because I tell you, I was at a protest video. Good thing I was masked because it wasn't blurred. Blur your fucking videos and photos, I swear to God. Sorry.
Yeah, just get a big sign, sling it around your back. When you see someone with the camera, sling it in front of you. That's what I did.
Yeah. I was masked and covered my tattoos at least. But
yeah. What do you save? Because I talk about this. I've talked about it before with like undocumented oral histories of how do you preserve, because those have been used for deportations at certain places. So how do you make sure that people, if you're preserving something of someone, it doesn't even have to be someone doing something illegal, because honestly, like none of this shit's illegal. Like these are all like misdemeanors at best because the university told you to leave and then it's a misdemeanor. But even then, like the university had no basis to tell you to leave. So, but it is still a misdemeanor. So, and I'm sure someone's going to try and hit protesters with felonies whenever they can. So, some psycho in the House of Representatives had a bill put forward today that if you are protesting and convicted at a pro-Palestinian protest at a university, you have to be exiled to Gaza for 6 months. It's your tax dollars at work. By the way, exile is illegal in common law, so I assume that would come up.
Or like, because when I've done like my presentations and stuff on like archival silence about how sometimes it's a good thing, right? One of the good examples of things being redacted politically is this, and I'll find it to put in the notes. Is this one oral history of around when Roe v. Wade was initially happened, and like around like before it and a little after it, and like the testimonies of like women and men and doctors and like all of these people, and the way that they redacted that information because they were like, we don't know what the statute of limitations on some of this is, or like what if this becomes illegal again, which surprise, but like their redaction process is really thorough, and so they were able to still document this political moment that happened and this important bit in history while protecting the people who gave them that information. It's a really good example of it, in contrast to, for example, when Boston University almost got an IRA person killed because of their redaction policies being insufficient.
Yeah. That collection had like crazy rules. It was like, once you die, your report can be released, but like other people implicated were still alive.
Yep.
Were mentioned in
that's
it. And it's like, what?
That's what happened. Yep.
You need a longer embargo. This is why I always tell people too, when like they want to give us a collection, and I'm like, okay, but it's not going to be public for 80 years, And they're like, what?
Yeah.
And it's like, because you didn't redact it. You didn't get consent. You didn't get informed consent. You didn't do anything. We have to wait till all these people are dead. So like, it'll be there for posterity, but like no one can use this for at least one lifetime. I mean, who even knows if the university will be around by then? Yeah,
which like sucks, redact things.
I think you're safe to save if you want to like have an accession policy in special collections. I just listed out some things I think would be fine, like protest signs. I've seen good protest sign collections, zines, official correspondence. So anything the university puts out, the policy changes, photos with nobody in them. So things like graffiti or like Twitter propaganda. So like it's like I ain't reading all that. You could put that photo or that tweet into like a collection, which would be good. Probably written demands that are anonymized. I'm trying to think of like what you can put in that really is going to have like minimal risk, but is going to still tell the story. I would probably not recommend oral histories, but you could probably use news reports. Oh, saving news reports is actually really good because news reports aren't archived properly. So
and they change, especially with like AP and stuff. Yeah.
Like I have a bunch of news reports from the Marti Cologne Cemetery, and those are invaluable because like otherwise I wouldn't be able to get them. And so it tells me about research that people have done, but like is not around anymore. Like the local news place like made a database of the graves. No one has that database, but I know it existed. And I know someone did it because it was mentioned in a news report. So start, it's kind of hard to tape the news because like it's all distributed. Half of it's online, half of it's in stupid web forms. But again, just really get your web archiving game up.
Yeah, like I think I've mentioned this before. Maybe I haven't. So when I went to the Tribal College Library Institute back in 2018, 2018, I think. One of the presenters was the librarian. I always forget the name of it. It's the college that was nearest to like Standing Rock and where like the Dakota Access Pipeline stuff was happening, and it was like the only place where internet was. So people would go there to upload things, and get on computers and everything. And the librarian, he was not indigenous. He was just a librarian who worked there and, was from that community. And what he did was he saved protest signs that were like left behind or that people donated. And also he went online and he found memes related to it. And he saved those. And he talked about when he would share them, he's like, I am violating copyright law by doing this because I don't know who the original person was and I don't have their permission. But it's more important that people see these and me maybe get asked to take it down than for people to not see these. And so that's another thing that we can be doing is like memes, because those usually don't like contain people in them. They might sometimes, but like, shit that you might see like on Instagram. I know it's like hard to save things on Instagram, but what you can do is you can either like screenshot it, or if you like share it, you can do a setting where if you share it as a story, it will then download that story to your phone and you can save it that way. So I might start doing that. Is I might try like saving memes and just like online posts and stuff that I find, like images. Yeah. Or like if you at your library, maybe start a little program where people can donate their protest signs and then they can be kept there or something. Like what this guy did was he made it an exhibit in his library and covered the walls of that college library with all of these protest signs from Standing Rock. Showed us pictures. It was really cool. But yeah, take that copyright risk, take memes, share them, archive them.
Well, libraries also have copyright exemptions too for research collections. So you're probably not really breaking copyright if you're doing it within like the function of your job. There's also the book, Baltimore Uprising, the Teen Epistolary, which I think I've mentioned before. And it's just tweets. The whole book is just tweets from teenagers around the Baltimore Uprising in 2014. And I think all the usernames are censored out or something. I think I still have it somewhere or not. It doesn't really matter because most of those accounts are probably defunct by now anyway. But yeah, you can definitely save a lot of stuff. I'm looking at some tools. One I want to mention is 4K Video Downloader. There's a free version, but there's a paid version that I do recommend. If you want to do mass YouTube archiving, it works. You can download a whole channel. So if you want to get like everything that's put up on like, I don't know, CNN's YouTube channel, you can just throw the channel in there and it will start queuing every video that they've ever posted. So it'll also queue playlists. You can put a playlist in there and it'll pull everything. And of course, one video at a time, it works fine. And it's not that expensive. And I think you get multiple licenses. So you could probably like split it between multiple people and go in for like a 3 license bundle, and it's a perpetual license. So, or it was when I bought it. So hopefully it still is. There's also archive.p8, which I believe will work on most things. I was trying to test it to make sure it'll work on that it's still like functional, but it actually passes paywalls and archives. So I'm going to also put that in there.
Yeah, I'm also trying to find when people were doing the Saving Ukraine Digital Heritage or whatever, the Sucho.
Yeah, there are lots
people,
of groups that do stuff like that.
Yeah, they had like a, maybe because it's over, they don't have it up anymore, but because they had like, how do you do like web archiving with all of the tools and everything? I'm trying to, because it's very much like a digital humanities thing.
Yeah, there was one for climate change data as well. Let's see if I can find it. But that one was very extensive, and it would teach you like different things. So it would tag it, and it would teach you all kinds of web archiving stuff. So I'm trying to see if I can find that site too. Let's see.
The Library of Congress has a web archiving thing.
Oh yeah, and I think it archives Twitter. I don't know if it does all of
right.
Twitter. Yeah, guerrilla archiving event, saving data from Trump, climate mirror.
Oh, aha. This is cool. I love GitHub, and I love the like awesome insert thing here repos where it's just like a curated list of like recommended tools and sites and things around a topic. So I just found one called Awesome Web Archiving that has training and documentation, resources for web publishers, tools and software, community resources, and even service providers. So hell yeah. And it was last updated 12 hours ago. Cool. Oh, Archives Unleashed, I think is. Yeah, there's Archive Box, Auto Archiver.
All right. Well, we'll put a whole bunch of stuff in the list.
Sorry.
So we can wrap up. Do you want to talk about Steve Albini?
Yeah, I don't have much to say. I always wanted to get him on the podcast, and that never happened. But Steve Albini died literally today. It's May 8th. And if y'all don't know who he is, a lot of people call him a producer, but he preferred the term engineer. His views on music production were very interesting. He was an incredibly prolific music engineer, as well as a musician. Like, so many of your favorite albums were probably produced by Steve Albini. If you like rock music or punk music, like he even produced In Utero by Nirvana, or he was like one of the engineers on it. And he had a couple of bands. And the reason why I always wanted to get him on here was of his comments about like Spotify and music streaming and like the music industry, and a lot of the same stuff that we talked about with like Cory Doctorow, for example. And like Steve Albini was all very much like everyone involved should get paid, like, musicians and producers and everything as workers, but also that people should kind of have free access to music. Like, he didn't like Spotify because it didn't pay the musicians, like the people who put music out, but he liked that people could access it for free. Like, he didn't like Tidal because it was subscription only, right? Like he came from this like DIY like punk like vibe where it's not about like, oh, I'm gonna sell my record for $1 million. It's I'm gonna encourage fanzines and people passing tapes around and stuff. So I because a lot of times people think that it's contradictory for like, I want people to access things for free and also workers should get paid. Usually it's workers should get paid, therefore people need to pay for things. But he was very much like, no, the workers need to be paid and also people should have this for free. And he was on Pod Damn America one time talking about Spotify and like exploitation in music streaming, and I thought it would be interesting to have him on eventually to like talk about that. And also he was very big into analog recording and media, because digital files can be erased on purpose deliberately by like record companies and stuff. And so like ideas about like digital versus physical preservation and access and everything. So I just thought I would mention that on here. R.I.P. and peace, dude. Yeah. I saw that news and I was just been bummed out and listening to his music all afternoon. I was like, no, it's Steve Albini. He was so cool. He had such good opinions. Yeah. Oh, hi, Arthur. You doing a big stretch? Yeah.
I fucking hate
know, buddy.
Elsevier, like Science Direct's citation button. I'm trying to grab the citation for the...
Do you want me to get it for you from Zotero instead? Would that be helpful?
Yeah, it's fine.
I got it. Are we going to do Chicago style or APA?
It doesn't matter. None of it matters. So I literally sent citations to someone today in like both APA and Chicago and MLA, just whatever was at the top of the generator for the site. I just need something to put in the notes.
There you go.
I don't remember when we mentioned this. Probably around here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, I also put in a question of like, how can library workers like support students in their universities and communities if you don't work in a university? Like, how can we be supporting these encampments, or just how can we be supporting protests and this current movement? That was like my open question. Hey, Arthur, I know, buddy.
Well, I'm going to put web archiving stuff in the notes, and there will be, we've already given some practical advice about preserving information, and then the rest is just be there to do support as a regular person.
Yeah.
Print off zines, that sort of stuff. We already covered all of it that I think of.
Oh, and also don't be a pussy. Archive things, even if the person's name is like Faye's Cum Dumpster or whatever. I loved that tweet exchange. It was so funny. Where someone was like, I'm begging people to change their Twitter names so that we don't have to archive things where your name is Cum Dumpster or whatever.
There is filth in special collections. It's fine.
Oh yeah, that's
sounds
what
like
it's
a
for.
you problem.
Yeah, sounds like a you problem. If your face Cum Dumpster, come on the show. Anyway, I ain't reading all that. Free Palestine.
Free Palestine. Good night.